Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We're going to take a special look today at something that I have been given, not an exclusive look at, because some other people have already pawed their way through this thing, but I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have been asked by Flying Pig Games to take a look at this, The Most Fearful Sacrifice, The 3 Days of Gettysburg. This is the latest American Civil War title from designer Herman Luttman, and again released by Flying Pig Games. This is, so we're clear, not a final component copy. This is a prototype. So if it doesn't look exactly like the finished stuff, then don't be surprised. Nevertheless, it is in a gigantic box that is not too far smaller than twice the size of a standard wargame box and thicker, and it is a very large game with some very nice components. So let's open this up. I've already pawed through this, of course, so let's open her up and see what all is going to come in here. Now, I will mention that this was the subject of a recent Kickstarter. That Kickstarter is now concluded, but you can late pledge, and I will include a link to do so in the video description, so check that out. You can late pledge directly through the Kickstarter site, so that's why I'm giving you a link to the Kickstarter, which is over, but you can still pledge. So there's a rule book and a scenarios book. The rules are an evolution of Herman's Blind Swords system, which I have played. Please check out the playthrough video of Thunder in the Ozarks, the Battle of Pea Ridge from earlier in the channel from sometime in 2020, with some small modifications. One of the modifications is, I think, going to be really minor, but represent a really noticeable difference in feel for the whole game, and that is to replace the chits with cards. The way Blind Swords plays is you kind of develop as you draw chits. You develop a sort of hand of chits, and that's going to feel way more satisfying and tactile with cards. In addition, the Blind Swords games are, at least the Civil War ones, are regimental, and this game is higher than that. Each component is going to represent either a brigade or a combination of regiments. So it's sort of between regimental and brigade scale, because otherwise, frankly, at the strictly regimental scale, the Battle of Gettysburg is an enormous game with thousands of pieces. So the rulebook itself, I'm not going to talk too much about like component quality because, well, with one exception, we'll get to that. Because these aren't final components. This is, like I said, this is a prototype. But the rulebook is 32 pages with an index. The index is always valuable, and I don't know why some games don't include them. Lavishly illustrated. The print is not super small. Most of this there's an example of play here, and that's actually this thing with tons of pictures in the back. The game system, based on my experience with Blind Swords, is very easy to play, and a lot of the things that a regimental scale Civil War game will get bogged down in, things like, is your artillery set up in battery, or are they in some kind of movement mode and unit facing and things like that. Those are things that we don't have to worry about in this system, and I think it is considered just those two things alone make the game system way easier to play. Otherwise, there are some minor differences that I've noticed, but otherwise this is pretty much the Blind Sword system. And then, of course, we have this 5 or 6, 8 pages maybe at the back of designer's notes and credits. We'll talk about credits in a bit. And the comprehensive example of play. Now, one of the other things about Gettysburg games specifically, and I can criticize specific Gettysburg games, especially regimental level, like big Gettysburg games, this is a pretty big game despite not strictly being regimental level, is that because it's a huge game, it really wants to have scenarios of different sizes to play, and I am very pleased to report that A Most Fearful Sacrifice has a really good selection of scenarios. Like 3 Days to Gettysburg, for example, is a game I played and I liked it a lot, but there's only 3 scenarios and none of them are small. And it's kind of an artifact of how that game system works. This system does not have that problem. But we have scenario 1, which is specifically set aside as a learning scenario. You're only going to use one of the two maps. Now you might think, oh, it's a tiny scenario then. I'm afraid not. The maps are enormous, and I'll show you the maps when we get to that. But the maps are mounted and huge. So scenario 2, you'll be coming around the mountain. So they're actually specified as small, medium, and large scenarios too. So this is a small scenario, north map. You're not using the whole south or north maps here, but still you can't partially set it up because they're mounted. Here's another small scenario, the Devils to Pay. Herman, of course, does have a blind swords game called the Devils to Pay, which is about that first day of Gettysburg with Generals Buford and Reynolds on the Union side and General Heath on the Confederate side. Scenario 4, an unexpected encounter. This has 3 possible lengths, medium, large, and the full day. This covers the entire first day of battle, which is, again, does a lot of the same content as the Devils to Pay, except it's at this larger scale. This game should play relatively quickly as well, once you get used to it. As you can see, there's quite a bit to that scenario. Here's scenario 5, Into the Whirlpool. We are nowhere close to the end of the scenario list, by the way. This is also a small scenario on the second day of the battle. This is with Longstreet, and this is going to be covered. Herman Lettman has done a lot on Gettysburg. He's done at least 2 Gettysburg games that I've seen, Longstreet Attacks and the Devils to Pay. Longstreet Attacks is day 2, or at least doesn't have all of the action of day 2, but it's all like the big action of day 2 that people remember and was in the movie. Scenario 6 is a small scenario. Scenario 7 simulates the entire late afternoon attack on the Union left flank by Longstreet. This is a large scenario, but it's still one map. And then scenario 8, like hailstones upon rooftops. This is a medium scenario. Scenario 9, the enemy is here. Key fighting on the second day of battle and encompasses the full Gettysburg battlefield. So that's both maps. Scenario 10, in magnificent style. This is Pickett's Charge. Okay, so small scenario, but Pickett's Charge. And you can actually see there's a map here. I'm not sure how well this is going to be visible on the camera, but here's the whole map. And Pickett's Charge is taking place in that general area around the middle. Scenario 11, One Continuous Roar, a small scenario. Scenario 12 is the historic grand battle scenario. So this is the whole kit and caboodle, as it were, the entire Battle of Gettysburg. And scenario 13 is a variant grand battle scenario that covers all 3 days as well. I haven't had the chance to look. Variant Reynolds lives. I haven't had the chance to look at the differences between those 2 scenarios. And for now, I want to take a look at the cards. And again, these are not final components, I hasten to remind you. But there's going to be these activation cards. First of all, there's one deck, and with both Union and Confederate cards in them. And then your activations you'll draw a card and then roll a die to determine who actually gets to attack and how that happens. I would like to be able to do some... I expect to have to send this along to somebody else at some point, but I would like to get a chance to do a little bit of a mechanics walkthrough in another video before that happens. And then there are event cards as well, and these are things that you'll be able to hang on to and play. The advantage of the cards over the chits is you have a chit that says, say hurrah, for instance. Well, that's fine, but then there's a rules section on what you do when hurrah is played, and you had to look that up every time. Now they can just be on the cards. So I think that's going to result in smoother play. And I realize that, of course, the cards are more expensive to produce, but it's going to result in they feel like cards, right? So why not make them cards? And it'll just play better and work better with cards. So we have here a bunch of Confederate and Union cards. And it looks like there's roughly 120 cards in here. I didn't count them, and I'm not going to. But it looks like there's roughly 120 cards. The cards that I see here are, nice quality, but I don't read anything into that. I expect. Now I have pawed through some of Flying Pig's finished games, and the cards are nice, so I expect these will be no different. Counters. Let's take a look at some of the counters. Now you get. This is punched, of course. These may have been hand cut. It's hard to tell. They kind of look to me like they were, just based on the amount of beveling that's occurred around the edges. So if you see anything, I haven't noticed anything. Like this one's a little bit off center, for example. Like I said, I'm reasonably sure these were assembled by hand. But nevertheless, let's pull out some Union counters here and take a look at what they look like. So they're double-sided, and it does appear that here is the full strength side with factors 7 and 5, and here's the reduced strength side with factors 4 and 4, and there's like a white corner flag to show you visibly that that is in fact the reverse side. These are larger than 5/8. I would say these are about 7/8 inch counters. Don't quote me on that, but they're quite big. Nevertheless, and the factors are big and pretty easy to read as well. Although the unit names is a little hard to read. This is Meredith, and I think that is largely a font choice thing. But like I also said, these are not final pieces, and that is something that could easily end up getting fixed in the finished game. I don't know, and honestly, even if I did, I probably wouldn't say what the projected delivery date on this is. And of course, we get a big pile of Union pieces and Confederate pieces, plus a number of markers for different things. I don't know what the delivery date on this is going to be, and I am not going to. I wouldn't say it even if I did, just because I wouldn't want to feel like I was committing Flying Pig games to some specific thing, because hiccups happen, right? So we have some player aid cards. Here's event tables, combat event tables. That's a mechanism I don't recognize. We also have this player aid. And I will say, I don't know if, like I said, these are prototype components, so these may end up easily not being a problem at all. But the type on both of these is quite small. I am pleased that they put the player aids are in full color, because these colors of the intensity of the hits, that's not the actual nomenclature, but the intensity of the combat result is indicated by color. So you really needed to have full color player aids on this thing. So we'll see what those end up looking like as well. Now I have to pull everything else off this table to try and lay out one of these maps. What we have in here are 2 mounted maps and a couple of displays for laying the cards out as well, for this Union command to display and Confederate command to display and another Union command display. I noticed that the corners are rounded. I don't know if that's going to be a thing in the finished game or not either, but it's kind of nice if it is. That'd be cool. I love rounded corners, as you know. So mounted maps, large mounted maps. And again, these are hand assembled too. I don't know if this is the final art, but this is the final artist, Rick Barber. And let's see how well I can do to setting this thing up on my tiny, tiny table. Rick is, of course, a legendary artist in the wargaming hobby. And for good reason. He is an enormous talent. I apologize right now. This is upside down, but I don't think I can get it right side up. This is a gorgeous map with nice big hexes. The counters are pretty big too, so you're not going to have a lot. I don't think most people will end up needing tweezers in this thing, for example, which we definitely needed in 3 days at Gettysburg. One of the things that I personally had with actually Thunder in the Ozarks, Herman's other game, was in some places the hex, the terrain was hard to read. And I think because of, I mean, glancing at it right now, because of the size of the hexes and because it's all nice and big, I think I will have a lot less problem with that in this particular game, which is fantastic because it's a beautiful map. It's definitely in the Rick Barber style. And as you can see, north is actually going to be this way, south is going to be that way. You can see that we have Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill down there, and this is special enough that I'm going to drop the other map on the table too. I don't want to be rough with these because they're, like I said, these are prototypes. They are taped together on the back. That won't be the case, I'm positive, with the finished maps. But the other map, which we will take care to do right side up this time, okay. And we can see over here that here we have our little round top and big round top. Devil's Den is in the center. So a lot of that Longstreet attacks and Pickett's charge content is going to be taking place in this area, a little farther up here, I think. But a lot of action is going to be happening on this south map, and it's not quite fully extended because there's also a turn record track. Looks like the turns are hourly turns, which from a scale perspective sounds about right given the unit scale and hex scale of this game. And here's our turn track, and here's our title, A Most Fearful Sacrifice. So let's put it all back together, and I'll give you some closing thoughts. One of the things that people say whenever a new Gettysburg game is announced is, well, do we really need a new Gettysburg game? And I mean, the answer is obviously, vacuously, yes, because people will buy a new Gettysburg game because it is a very popular topic. People like Gettysburg as a topic. Gettysburg also, from a practicality standpoint of play, has a number of things about it that are very attractive. For one, it is a meeting engagement, so that means that in virtually any Gettysburg game, setup time is absolutely trivial. There is going to be like 6 counters on them. It might be more than that, but even in a strictly regimental level game, you have less than 16 counters on the map to start with, and that really enables you to get going and get into the game and start experiencing the play very quickly. Line of sight rules in Blind Swords are quite straightforward, much less fiddly than those in Line of Battle or in Great Battles of the American Civil War. Those are two game systems that I like a lot, but at the same time, it would be awfully nice to have a game that fills something closer to the niche that the old Avalon Hill Gettysburg filled, which I think was a brigade level, but that you can play in a relative, like a long sitting or something like that. Certainly you can't do that with the regimental level Gettysburg games that I am familiar with. So personally, and I've played the system too, and I think it is a smooth playing and very approachable game system. So personally, I was all for this particular new Gettysburg game from a respected designer, Herman Lettman, and from a publisher that does high quality stuff that I haven't personally bought a lot of stuff from because most of their stuff is tactical, and tactical is not really my thing. But then when we get into something like regiment to brigade level American Civil War, then that becomes something that I am very much interested in. So Flying Pig Games has my attention with this release. So, like I said, I am going to try, before Mark asks me to ship this off to somebody else, I'm going to try to get another video of this completed so that I can give you a little bit of a closer look at the actual mechanics, which do differ in a number of detailed ways from Blind Swords. So we're going to try to do that sometime soon. In the meantime, if you found this video instructive or useful, please do give it a thumbs up. Please do check out the link in the video description to the Kickstarter where you can still late pledge. And I think based on what I see here from the prototype in terms of what all you're getting in the box, I think the pledge price is pretty reasonable nowadays. So do check that out. Do subscribe to the channel and click the little bell icon to get notified when new content comes out. And if you'd like to support Ardwulf's Lair, feel free to check out the Patreon and merch store links also in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.